L'kutei Sichos Chelek Tezvav, Miketz Gimel, Lili Nishmas Rabbi Yosef Binyamin ben Rabbi Menashe Kaltman. What a fascinating Sicha. What is the essence of Galus? What is the essence of a Yid? See how a Rashi Sicha leads us to understand what is the ultimate true essence of Galus. Of course, the answer is the Geula, but see how we get there. Beautiful. In Pasuk Vayemeru Elav v'Gomer Chalila Lavadecha Me'asayis Kadavar Hazeh, at the end of Parshas Miketz, when the brothers of Yosef have left Mitzrayim with Binyamin, and the silver goblet belonging to Yosef was hidden amongst their belongings, and Yosef's messenger chases after them and catches up to them and accuses them of taking the goblet. They say Chalila Lecha, Chalila, that we to your Chalila Lavadecha, that we would do such a thing. So Rashi brings two commentaries on the words Chalila. Number one, Chulin Hulanu, this is Chulin, this is mundane. This is something that is Lashon Ginai. Rashi explains Chulin, the fact that it's mundane, that it's unholy, means to say that it would be a disgrace. They're saying this is not something that we would do. The Targum Onkelos says Chas la'avadecha. Chas as in mercy or pity. Hashem should have mercy upon us, pity upon us, from doing such a thing. And many times in the Gemara we find the term chas v'shalom, which literally means peace, mercy and peace, which is used as an expression for heaven forbid. This is something that God Almighty would have mercy on us and stop us from doing such a thing. So Rashi brings two pirushim. Chalila, either chulinu lanu, this would be something that is unseemly to us, it would be a disgrace for us. Another chas la'avadecha. Rashi points out that this term chas v'shalom is in the Gemara many times. If I'm not mistaken, it's in the Gemara at least 30 times throughout Shas. Now, Fried in Parshas Vayera, earlier on in Parshas Vayera, by the time of Avram and when Avram is arguing with Hashem with regards to destroying the city of Sodom, and he says, would you destroy a tzaddik, a righteous person, with the wicked people? It would be chalila for you to do such a thing. When Rashi is dort mefarish diverter chalila lecha, and over there Rashi translates the words chalila lecha, chulin hulach. This would be chulin, mundane to you, unseemly. People will say this is Hashem's common practice that He kills a tzaddik with a rasha. So we actually have two places in the Torah where the term Chalila is used. In Parshas Vayera, Rashi just says Chulinu Lecha. Here Rashi says Chulinu Lecha and adds the words Lashon Gnai, that it is, Chulin in this case, is a term of disgrace. And Rashi adds a second pirush, Chas, that this is something that is heaven forbid. That from first states we have to understand both of these points. Aleph Arvos in Parshas Vayera, wo steht der Lashon Chalila zum ersten Mal, ist sich Rashi mistapek mit dem Abteich Chulinu Lecha. Number one, und in unser Parsha benugend sich nicht mit sagen Chulinu Lanu, und is Mosef Lashon Gnai. Number one, why does Rashi in Parshas Vayera suffice with saying this is an expression of mundaneness and does not add anything? And here he adds that this is an expression of a disgrace. If the word chulin requires explanation, Rashi should have explained it the first time the word chalila is used. And Rashi explains chulin, that chalila comes from the term chulin, which means mundane or devoid of holiness. Beis Nachmer. And then we have the second question. Rashi is that not only does Rashi add the words that this is an expression of disgrace to the first explanation that he gives, which is the word chulin, but Rashi introduces an entirely new and second explanation. The Targum says chas. Is in Parshas Vayera genug der pirush chulin ulach. Why in Parshas Vayera does the first and over there the only explanation chulin ulach, that chalila comes from the term chulin, something that is mundane and unseemly? Why over there does that Pirush suffice? Und dois does nicht maspik. And here in our parsha, Parshas Miketz, the explanation Chulin does not suffice. Not only Chulin and with the words Genai, but also the entire thing is not enough. And we have to bring on another explanation that Cholila comes from the word Chas. So these are the two questions that we have in Rashi. Number one, why does Rashi have to add the word Lashon Genai and not just leave it with Chulin Ulach? And number two, why does Rashi introduce a second Pirush that Cholila comes from the word Chas, from the words pity? They're beer in them, and here is the explanation. And often in Rashi Sichis, it takes a few Oisius, a few Seifim to introduce the questions, and then the bulk of the Sicha is the answer or the answers to the questions. Here, right away in Siv Beis, the Rebbe is right away going to answer the question and then lead us to the lessons that could be learned from the answers. They're beer in them. So here's the beer. In Parshas Vayera is a Lashon Chalila Gezak Gevaron Klape Dem Ebersten. In Parshas Vayera, Avram Avinu is speaking to Hashem. When he says Chalila Lecha, he's saying Chalila to you, to Hashem. Was bei ihm is klal nit shaykh der Inyan von Chulin v'chayil. By Hashem, the concept of mundaneness is not applicable. Is the Riber genug zu sagen, as asayis kadavar hazeh bitmiya is val Chulin ulach. Therefore, to say that I'm surprised that you would do such a thing, it's enough to say because it's mundane. And with that alone, it makes it clear that this is entirely out of the question for the Eibishter. The Eibishter is the epitome of Kedusha, of holiness. Something that is chulin, that is mundane, that is not holy, is obviously out of the question for the Eibishter. So when you say chulin ulach to the Eibishter, that the Eibishter, this is mundane, that tells you everything that you need to know. This is something that is out of the question. So Avram says, Chalil lecha, this is mundane. It's clear that this is something that is totally out of the question to the Eibishter. There's no reason to add anything to that. In unser Parsha, however, in our Parsha, where we're talking to people who are engaged in mundane matters. Bazei is blois chulin ulanu. Nit kein tam maspik zu shelos haime aseis kedavar hazeh fun zu nemen dem gviya kesef. Just to say to these people that this is mundane is not enough to uproot the idea that they would do something like this to steal the silver goblet. Because what is so terrible about human beings doing something that is mundane? That's what we do 6 days a week. It's called a weekday because we're involved in mundane matters. So the fact that a person it does something that's chulin doesn't emphasize that this is out of the question. That even muzdor Rashi meisav zayin as chulin ulanu is lashon genai. Therefore, Rashi has to add the words that chulin over here is a term of disgrace. Is nit bagrenetz zum Teichen von Wachedigkeit. Because here chulin doesn't just mean that it's mundane. No, it says eichal lashon was batzeichen that die Sache is meguna. It's an expression that symbolizes that this is something that is disgraceful. Ubemela abgefragt, and therefore it's out of the question. When you're talking to a regular person, you can't say, "Oh, this is mundane." So what? No. This is a disgrace. If it's a disgrace, then clearly this is something I wouldn't have done. So already the key of the answer is that it depends who you're talking to. In Vayera, he's talking to the Eibishter, and therefore the word chulin, mundane, is enough to take it out of the picture. Here we're talking to human beings, and therefore, or about human beings, and therefore it's not enough to say that it's mundane. We have to clarify that mundane here means disgraceful. So that explains why Rashi has to add the words lashon genai. Why does Rashi have to add another pshat? So in Siv Gimel, the Rebbe is going to explain that there's something missing, problematic with this explanation. Aber der Pirush is nicht glattig, this Pirush is somewhat problematic. Well, then is shaykh zu sagen as chulin ulanu is a lashon genai. When could you say that something that is mundane is disgraceful? Wenn sie letztlich wegen azam Mensch, was mit Tzad sein Meile v'chashivus hat legamri nicht zu tun mit den Yonechel. If you're talking about the type of person that is on such an elite status that he is far removed from mundane matters. Und der Riber, wenn batzeichen der gewisse Sache als chulin, so if he attributes a certain thing to be mundane, is this a lashon gnai, then it's disgraceful. Ba'im is the zach zayin dikhul davar meguna, because since he's on such a high level, and this is mundane, so automatically it becomes a disgrace to him. And as the Rebbe points out in Seif Gimel, Yosef himself uses this term at the end of the parsha, Chalila li me'asei zois, this is mundane to me to have done this. Because since Yosef was an Adam Chashav, Yosef was an important person, anything that is chulin is automatically a disgrace. The Rebbe now adds back into the pnim of the Sikha, quite the contrary. Midem loshen is a dizach shelel noch mer viducha befedish in loshen gnai. When using the term chalila, this would negate this even more than a more clear expression of disgrace. Hey, Jesus das beweist, as a Sach, was es nicht lifi erkei malosei, is bei ihm azoi abgefragt. Bis as a davar chulin is bei ihm nicht weniger gnai, wie a davar meguna mamish. When a person is important and you say chalila, you're saying that something that is mundane is as out of the question as something that is truly abhorrent, such as gneva v'chetzim, such as stealing. You're emphasizing the loftiness of the person, so automatically anything that is not 100% holy is out of the question. It raises the stature of the person by comparing something that is mundane and something that is disgraceful. So it raises the stature of the person by using the term chalila. Here the Shvatim have to negate the claim that they were capable of stealing. Es ist schwer zu sagen, als sie haben es gewollt beweisen mit der Taina Chulin Ulanu. Now, it's difficult to say that they were trying to negate it by saying, this is mundane to us. Das is Toli Tanya Bedeloi Tanya. This is, in a sense, and this is a quote from the Gemara, you're trying to learn something that is clearly in a brisa from something that is not in a brisa. Over there in the Gemara is asking if you're allowed to eat the fruit that you hung up in the sukkah as noi sukkah. Someone used fruit as to decorate the sukkah, so now they became part of the mitzvah. So the question is, I'm sorry. The Gemara over there asks if you're allowed to count. No, this is true. So the Gemara is asking, are you allowed to eat the fruit that was used for noi sukkah because it became part of a mitzvah? So the Gemara says that we have a teaching of Rav Asi that you're not allowed to count money count your money by the lights of the menorah, because you're not allowed to benefit from the lights of the menorah. So if you can't count the money by the lights of the menorah, then certainly you can't eat the fruit that were hanging in the sukkah. So the Gemara says you can't make the comparison because the prohibition of the prohibition of using the sukkah, the mitzvah of the sukkah to having benefit from that is a brisa, and the prohibition of using the Neides Chanukah is not a brisa. It's only a teaching of Rav Asi. So the Gemara says, Tali Tanya b'deloi Tanya. You're trying to learn something that is in a brisa, the prohibition of enjoying this things of taking benefit from the sukkah, from something of Neides Chanukah that's not even a brisa. So you can't learn something that is stronger from something that is weaker. Here, you're trying to do the same thing. You're trying to learn something that is stronger from something that is weaker. As Geneva is bazei mufrich, val afilu chulun bazei davar meguna. Geneva is stealing. Chulin is not prohibited. It's just beneath them. It's just unseemly. So how can you really prove to someone to say that I'm not shaykh to Geneva because you say it's chulin? Even chulin is not such a out of the question thing. Especially since who are they trying to convince? Someone who's not even Jewish. Jesus' messenger. And someone that is from Mitzrayim, which was by definition a place of immorality. Which person who comes from such a place, certainly mundane matters are not a disgrace. So when you're talking about a person who is not on such a high level that chulin are so far removed from them, and you're talking to a person that is not going to get the differentiation, the distinction. So to say chulin hulanu, that chalila means chulin, is very difficult. Because how you can convince that person that you're not capable of doing such a thing just by saying that it's chulin, even if you add the word that it's genai. So because of that, it would have been more appropriate, more befitting, to try to express how much stealing is out of the question, not by saying chalila, which means chulin, use a different expression that more clearly expresses the disgrace of such an act. Therefore, Rashi brings a second pirush that chalila doesn't mean chulin. It doesn't mean that it's mundane, but it means chas meis HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem should have mercy on us. Heaven forbid. Sie haben gesagt chas v'shalom, as bei soll sein Inin für Gneva. Und noch mehr, chas meis HaKadosh Baruch Hu yehi aleinu me'asei zeis. Der Eibishter hat auf unser Achmanis und der Lost nicht am Zon afilu b'shegig nicht so in Azazach. Hashem should stop us. Not only He should stop us, but He should have mercy upon us, and not allow us that we should even inadvertently succumb to the sin of stealing. So now it has a totally different meaning that is much more fitting to the people involved in this conversation. It doesn't mean chulin, which doesn't really make the point strong enough. It means chas. The only question remains, in that case, why does Rashi put chulin ulanu first and chas second? So the Rebbe explains, we don't find anywhere in Tanakh that the word chalila should mean chas, should mean pity or mercy. So first of all, Rashi has to clarify and say that in the Gemara we do find it. So it's not like Rashi is making it up, chas v'shalom, but Rashi is actually referring to the Gemara where this is brought on numerous occasions. And this is why Rashi brings it as the second explanation. And the first and primary explanation is that chalila means chulin, because that at least has a source in Torah Shabiksav, where there are other places where the word chalila means chulin, mundane. So this concludes the questions and the answers on Rashi. Asked and answered, as the expression goes. Number one, why does Rashi add the word lashon gnai? Because since we're not talking to the Eibishter, chulin by itself, mundane by itself, doesn't call it out of the question, and therefore has to say, when I say chulin, I mean something that's a disgrace. But nevertheless, and then on top of that, because we're talking to people, human beings, and we're talking to a goy from Mitzrayim, who even chulin lashon gnai does not necessarily suffice to call this out of the question. Therefore, Rashi adds the word chas, but Rashi adds the explanation chas, but nevertheless, since there's no source in Torah, in Tanakh rather, for chulin meaning chas, Rashi brings us as the second pirush. Sivdala deira from the pirush Hashem, from the pirush Rashi, the lesson, the takeaway. So first of all, the Rebbe is going to explain that even though we're talking about the Shvatim and not the Avos, nevertheless, since all the Shvatim join together in this expression, Chalil Alecha, there has to be a lesson to everyone. The Alter Rebbe is invited in Torah. The Alter Rebbe explains in Torah that the levels of the Avos have to be emulated by every person. But other levels, for example, those things that you find in the Shvatim and not in the Avos. There are some people that would not contain these levels. Just because the Shvatim had them doesn't necessarily mean that every single Yid that follows is going to embody these very same character traits. The Pshat derfun is, however, the meaning of this, nicht jeder Id muss haben in sich die alle Beginnes und Unionen meyuchadim, was damit hat sich ein Shevet ausgeteilt von the andere. Those things which were unique to certain Shvatim, and therefore they distinguish themselves from their other Shvatim by these character traits, not necessarily do they need to be passed down to every single Yid. So if Reuven was unique in a certain way, not every Yid is obligated to embody the character traits of Reuven. Aber die Beginnis von Janim Klolium, was seinen given bei alles Shvatim, but those overall character traits that all of the Shvatim embodied, als banim from the Avis, as the heirs of the fathers, of the forefathers, muzen ze zayin by Yed Nidin, these need to be embodied by every Yid. The fact that the Alter Rebbe says that not everything by the Shvatim is embodied by the Yidden that come after are the things that are unique to certain Shvatim, but the things that are equal, that by all of the Shvatim, this also has to be passed on to all of the Yidden. And therefore, something that the Shvatim said as a collective group is something that we have to learn from. Similarly, in our discussion, is not to come from Hashevet Prati, nor from the Shvatim B'chalusam, since this argument that this is something that is mundane to us and is a disgrace to us, didn't come from one individual Shevet, but it came from all of them together, is moving as that inyan for Chulun Ulanu is Nagia Yet Nidin, therefore it's understood that this concept of Chulun Ulanu, this is mundane to us, is something that is relevant to every single Yid. And how? A Yid must know that his entire being, his entire essence is holiness. Mit Chulin Gashmis seine besondere Welten. A Yid with the mundane world, with the material world, is two separate worlds. Bis as das haben zu tun mit Gashmis als Chulin mit Zvima Gnai. So much so that the engagement with mundane matters is a disgrace. As dar sein by him in ganzen abgefragt, it should be totally out of the question. And this has to be something not only that he keeps inside of himself, also externally. In a manner that even the nations of the world should be able to recognize that this is a person that is not really connected to mundane matters. As we said earlier, for the Shvatim, they understood very, very simply that this argument of Chulun Ulanu would suffice even to make the point to a goy from Mitzrayim, as bazei is nitshayach hazayin, that this is not applicable to them, this is not possible for them. Das heißt, eicha goyder kennt, weis as Chulun is von sei muslul, punkt wie gneve beandere. Even a goy could recognize that something that is mundane is out of the question, just like something that is actually a disgrace and actually a prohibition, such as stealing. Torah instructs the Yid 6 days a week you should work and do your work. As a Yid bechel soll sich vernehmen mit Chulun, that a Yid during the days of the week should involve himself with the mundane world. So what are you saying, that a Yid is separated from Chulun if there's a directive from Torah to be involved in the world? Is niti kavane in them as soll sich herablassen zu die Chulun. It does not, Torah doesn't mean that a Yid should lower himself down into the mundane world. Nor adraba as soll ze meile sein zu der Darge Matze von Chulun shenasu al taras hakodesh. What the Torah wants of the Yid is that rather than he go down into the mundane world, the Yid should elevate the mundane world to the level of holiness. Chulun shenasu al taras hakodesh is an expression when preparing produce that is not becoming truma or maises or anything like that, but nevertheless it's prepared with the same purity level, so that if it needs to become taharis, it can. So the Rebbe is using that expression that when we engage in the material world, it has to be done in a way that we elevate the mundaneness of the world to the level of holiness and purity. Which this is accomplished by the Aveda of everything that you do is l'shem shemayim, for the sake of heaven. That you know Hashem in everything that you do. The difference between the two is explained in Likutei Sichos and other places. The basic difference is kol masecha yiyu l'shem shemayim means that it's still something that is totally mundane. It is totally, but the purpose of it is for Hashem. So, for example, you're making money in order to give tzedakah. Means that in what you're doing, in the actual thing that you're doing, there already is Hashem in it. For example, eating food on Shabbos, which is a mundane act of eating, but in itself is a mitzvah because it's Einik Shabbos. Bis as there is a mekadesh mamish, still you go beyond these two. That not only it's masecha and derachecha, it's still your ways and it's still your deeds, but you make it totally holy. Ziver and kachim kalim. First it becomes the lower level of holiness, and then it becomes the higher level of holiness. So that's the lesson from Chalila Lecha, from telling this messenger from Yosef, that this is chulin hulano, that this is mundane for us, that anything that is mundane, anything that is material is not part of our world, and even when we engage with it, it's only for the purpose of elevating it. How does a Yid do this? This seems to be a paradox. And the one hand, you're telling a Yid to go into the world and work with the material world. At the same time, you're telling him not to be dragged down by it, but to lift it up. Sifhei. The fact that a Yid could reach this level, as I feel, that is when he is involved with permission from the Torah, with material matters, is he remains removed from it. So that as something that is mundane is considered something of a disgrace to him. This comes because this is how it is by the Eibush, by Hashem. That even the divine light that is manifest in the world, it does not become grasped or changed by the world, and he cannot say that something is mundane when it comes to the Eibishter. There's parts of the Eibishter, there's levels, manifestations, I should say, of godliness that are far removed from this world. We've spoken about these many times in the Sikhs, where in Chassidus in general, where it's higher than Ratzon, and it's so high that what happens in this world doesn't affect it. But then there is a manifestation of godliness that does come down into this world, creates this world. As we'll see in a moment, there's schar v'onish. There's consequences for the person's actions from Hashem, good for good, and not for the opposite. But nevertheless, it never changes the divine light that it should become mundane. It engages with this world, so to speak, but it doesn't become changed. They're meat. So before we get back to the how this applies to the Yid, that because the Yid has a piece of Hashem in them, therefore they can also embody the same character trait, that despite the fact that they're engaged into this in this world, they are also capable of remaining above it and elevating it, which we'll say after the brackets. The Rebbe adds in a parenthetical comment. The mit is moving the adgosho and chachpole in Tainas Avram. This explains the emphasis and the redundancy in Avram's claim. First, it says Chalila lecha me'asois. It would be chulin. It would be mundane for you to do something like this. And then Avram says again Chalila lecha ha'shefet kolaretz. It would be mundane for you, the judge of the world. The lecher event zevalt afilu shayach given zu sagen. Even if you would venture to say, if it were possible to say, that Hashem is not the just judge of the world, even a judge that's not 100% just would still not do such a thing to kill the tzaddik with the rasha. So why does Avram have to add this? He said already said already said this is something that is beneath you, that is unseemly. So why does he have to add the words but now we understand that there's a level of godliness that does come down into this world, and even that level is far removed from being changed or affected and becoming mundane. This is exactly Avram's emphasis. As a filu in the darga from Hashefet Kol Haaretz, even the level of godliness that judges the world, the darga from Elokus u'Ma'aseh Techteinim Zayin Tevis Makim, the level of godliness where the deeds of the world below do have a reach. They're judged by that level. And from that level is drawn down the idea of reward and punishment. So obviously that level is aware of what's going on in this world, and the mundaneness of this world, and even the bad that goes on in this world. That even on that level, the mundaneness of it is not applicable. And therefore, Avram says, now that even Hashevet Kol Haaretz, even the level of godliness that goes down into this world, to give life to this world, and to judge this world, Chalila, it would still be chulin for you. It would still be unseemly. It would still be mundane to you to be able to do such a thing, because even the level of godliness that goes down into the world is also far removed from the world itself. Und the Rebbe now going back to the Yid, who is in the world, but is trying to stay above the world. Therefore, because by the Eibishter it's like that even the level of godliness that comes down into the world is removed from the chulin, from the mundaneness of the world. The same thing works with a Yid, who is a piece of Hashem, as a feel even if he is engaged with material matters. It does not become changed by it. In his true essence, he remains removed from it. So much so that the mundaneness, the materialness of it is a disgrace, is something that is totally out of the question. Und das Guf ist der Tam, was Yid atem keach zu bemachen die Chulin. Bis as his own sein Chulin von Asal Taras HaKedesh. And this is how, this is the reason, this is how the Yid has the strength to be able to change, to transform the mundane world, that it should become on the level of holiness, of holy purity. Because by definition, that's what a Yid is. A Yid, in his essence, is a chulin, is not chulin, is muvdal, is removed from the chulin, is taras hakodesh, and therefore, because that is who the Yid is, therefore he has the ability to stick to who he truly is, and even when he goes down and to do what he has to do in the world, nevertheless, it doesn't change him. On the contrary, he changes the world. The Rebbe in Sivav and Zayin is going to apply this to the concept of Galus as well. And not just in the individual Yid, but the whole idea of Galus is really for the Geula, and therefore, the Galus cannot affect us too deeply. This lesson that a Yid is Chalil, that a Yid that the material world is chulin, is beneath what a Yid truly is. This is connected to the general theme of our parsha. In welches Retzach wegen dem Miketz und die letzte Sibis von Meurois, wir haben der Führer der Yerida Bepel von Yaakov an Mitzrayim, which discusses the very end of this era before Yaakov goes down into Mitzrayim, and the events that caused Yaakov to have to go down to Mitzrayim. Und in dem Galus Mitzrayim versus Reish Chala Golius, and what happens in Galus Mitzrayim, which is the beginning, the first of all of the Golius. In other words, Parshas Miketz is the end of the era that led up to Yaakov going to Mitzrayim, which ultimately led to Galus Mitzrayim. It says, there's known what the teaching of our Rebbes as nar unsere Gufen sein übergegeben in Galus v'shibet Malchus. Only our bodies were given over to Galus and to servitude to the nations. Our souls were not chased into Galus, and were not given over into servitude to the nations. So already, before we even start, we have to understand that the fact that a Yid is in Galus is only the goof of the Yid is in Galus. The Neshama is not in Galus. Und der Rieber kann Galus haben a Shlita auf Yidden, nor demelt, wenn sein Guf und Yonim Geismim haben mit Vismakim. So therefore, Galus can only control a Yid if his material matters, his material pursuits become a primary issue. Or b'shas is an vayim nitei Vismakim. But if his material pursuits are not important to him, it's beneath him, it's unseemly to him. Because his neshama is what is shining, and the neshama has no connection to the mundaneness of the world. The galus cannot control him. A galus can only control a Yid that gets carried away with the materialism of galus. Was die letzte Passierung, was hat Gedem gewinnt zu Yidus Yaakov wandel Mitzrayim, ist gewinnt das, was man bei die Schwatim gefunden im Kviyah HaKesef. This will also explain why the final event that ultimately led to Yaakov and his children having to come down to Mitzrayim was the fact that the silver goblet was found in the possession of the Shvatim. Von Golus und Shibud Malchius kennen it Shel sein auf Eden Seiden, wenn sie Bazei Dolach Alapachis Epis Achisorin in dem Hergis von Chulin Lashon Gnai. Golus and servitude cannot control a Yid unless there is some chip in the armor. If there's some lack in this feeling that materialism is beneath us, that is where the galus seeps in through that crack and takes hold. Das, was ist ein Nichsel geworden. So haben bei sich the fact that they succumbed, the fact that they made the mistake, that they had the silver goblet in their possession, even though it was without their knowledge. But the fact that it was there is a beweis of a gewisse chisoren in their hergish ashlibe von chulin. This represented some lack in their realizing, in their recognizing, in their feeling that materialism is out of the question, and therefore it led to Agalus. As we know, the Alter Rebbe brings in the Geras HaKodesh that on the neshama level, a yid cannot even transgress something inadvertently. It's only on the guf level. Similarly, only once there was this issue that they had a stolen goblet in their possession, that was the chip in the armor that allowed the galus to push through and actually happen. Because when a yid is on a level where chulin, where materialism and mundaneness is out of the question entirely, you won't even find it by them, even inadvertently, then the galus can't do anything, it can't happen. And in Sif Zayin, the Rebbe takes it even a step further. Not only is a yid in galus not controlled by the galus, unless he allows himself to fall into the materialism of galus. Galus itself is not really galus, if you're able to see that the ultimate goal of galus is geula. Just like we said about a yid, the whole concept of galus is only on an external level, but on a deeper level, on the neshama level, a yid is always in a state of chedus, in a state of freedom and geula. The same thing can be applied to galus itself. The whole purpose of why the Eibishter sent a yid into galus is for the elevation, the ascent, and the redemption that follows. The whole thing is only on an external level. On a deeper level, on a true level, the whole galus is actually a geula. Just to explain this concept of chitzenis and pnimius, in Chassidus it explains there's a chitzenis ratzon, there's a pnimius ratzon. Pnimius ratzon is what the person ultimately wants to do. The goal of the person, let's say, wants to have a nice house. So the pnimius ratzon is to have a place to live. The fact that you have to hire workers, and the fact that you have to choose tiles, and the fact that you have to build is also you want to do it, but it's chitzenis ratzon. It's an external desire that brings to the ultimate internal desire, which is to have a house. So the whole purpose here of galus is geula. The pnimius haratzon is geula. In order to do that, there had to be a galus. But that's only a chitzenis haratzon. That's only something external that's meant to lead up to the ultimate goal, which is the geula. So really, the galus is only a means to an end, not an end of it itself. Und das ist echt der Bier Pnimi von der Maimer Chazal Yadua. As take nach ein Churban Leil Mishim V'Gelen Shal Yisrael. This explains a deeper understanding in what Chazal teach us, that as soon as the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, immediately the Savior and the Redeemer of the Yidden was born. Das heißt, as gleich bei der Aschala von der Galus hat sich angegeben die Geula. Wie bald das ist der ganze Tegen Pnimi von dem Galus. Immediately at the beginning of the Galus, the Geula was already born, because that is the goal. That is the reason why the Galus started, and that is the purpose of the Galus, and therefore the Geula began at the very beginning. Und in dem Beich bei steht der Aveda von der Yidden, this too requires the Aveda of a Yid. Durch dem was peilt as in seiner Hage, so sich head in sein Pnimius Dicker Mehus, when a person is able to attain the fact that in his avodah he recognizes what his true essence is. The neshama vasechet von seinen galus, the neshama that is beyond higher than being in galus, is reich begala the pnimis and kavana from the galus. Through this, by doing so, he also reveals the true goal and purpose of the galus. The gilu from the gula, he could reveal the gula. If a yid lives in a gula way, in a gula manner, this actually reveals the actual gula. That this whole a world is here for the whole galus is here for the purpose of geula. And Sif Ches and on, we're going to sort of go into a new topic. The connection is going to be the primacy of the geula in our lives. But we're going to learn another Rashi, and we're going to make this very same point by seeing this in another Rashi. This is a diktuk Rashi, so it's a little bit different than the Rashis we're used to, but it is not difficult. The Geretchen Filmo said, it's been discussed many times that in Rashi you find some incredible ideas from all the parts of Torah, including Remez and Sod, the hints, the allusions that there are in Torah, and the esoteric parts, the secrets of the Torah. Everything can be found in Rashi. Often the Rabbi uses the term Inyanim Floim when he brings Inyanim in Halacha. Here it's going to be Inyanim of Remez. Remez and Sod. We're going to find a Remez, a hint to this concept of Galus and Geula in a Rashi, B'siyum von unser Parsha. Av diverter umanit stadok. The pasuk, the second to last pasuk, the Shvatim said to Yosef, "Manedaber umanit stadak." What can we say? How can we justify ourselves? How can we prove our justice, our righteousness? Rashi mefarish that the word nitzadak is lashon tzedek, lashon of righteousness. Then Rashi says like this: any word that begins with the letter tzaddik, and wants to say something in the English Chumash, it says reflexive. It's something that is happening, like mispoel or nispoel. Nois and tes b'makom tov. So first of all, you have the shaydish word. Let's say the word mispoel. The shaydish is pa'al, pei ayin lamed. To say mispoel, they add a sof before the word pa'al. Mispoel. Or say, for example, the word would be nohag, conducting oneself. You say misnaheg. So you add a sof before the word, the shaydish word, which is nohag. But if the word begins with a tzaddik, then you would add a tes instead of a tuf. Number one. Number two, also, the tes is not going to be before the word, the source word, like in mispoil, where the sof is before paal, but the tes is going to be in the middle of the word. So in the word nitztadok, the word is tzedek, that's the source word, and there's a tes placed in the middle of the word to make it beloshin mispoil, that it's happening. That's Rashi brings them, and then Rashi brings a number of examples where you see that is a word that starts with a tzaddik and a tes is added, and the tes is added in the middle of the word. Then Rashi continues, a word that begins with a samach or a shin, kishehi mispaelis, when it's being said in the same context of that something is happening. Hatov mafredes as eis iker. Here, they don't put in a tes, it puts in a tof, but the tof is also in the middle of the word, not at the beginning of the word. Meaning not before the shaydish, it's in the middle of the shaydish. Rashi brings dugmois. Rashi brings examples. First, Rashi brings examples from words that begin with a samach, such as sabol and sochol. Such as shamar and shoylel. Then Rashi brings examples of words that begin with a shin, where you see that a taf is added in the middle of the word. And then the last example that Rashi brings is from the pasuk mistoylil ba'ami, and Rashi says migizras derech loy sulula, that the word mistoylil comes from the word solal sulula, and do you see that the taf is in the middle of the word of solal? So we give me that means an unpaved path, and the word mistoylil comes from the word slula, and the taf is in the middle. So the Rebbe has three questions on this Rashi. Darf verstehen. Aleph leiten seid in der Pirish Rashi, es meisten bringt der Gmeis von Werte mit der Samach beim Onim und nach dem Werte mit der Shin beim Onim. Rashi usually first brings examples from the words that start with Samach, and then examples that start with examples from words that start with the letter Shin. Hat doch gedarf bringen die Dugel von Mistoylel. So the example of mistoylel, which Rashi brings at the very end of the Rashi, should have been brought, number one, Aleph, zusammen mit alle Dugmois von Tevis Shitchalasi B'Samach, with the other examples that came from the letter Samach, Beis, Fardi Dugmois von Tchalasi B'Shin, before the Shin. In other words, when Rashi puts the word mistoil at the end, first of all, he's separating the samachs, and second of all, he's bringing a samach after a shin, which usually he doesn't do because samach comes before shin. So that's the question number one. Why does Rashi bring the word the example of mistoilel at the end of the Rashi after shin, separate from all the other samachs? Beis, Vayvaz sagt Rashi do as mistoilel is migizras derech loy selula. Anders wie sagt beatzmei von Pasuk Eitcha mistoilel bi mekoymoi in Parshas Va'era as mistoilel is migizras mesila. In Va'era, Rashi says, what does this word mistoilel mean? It comes from the word mesila. Mesila means a path. Oitcha mistoilel ba'ami, Moshe is saying to Paro, you're still stepping on my people, like trotting on the path. So in Va'era, he uses the word mesila. Here, Rashi uses the word slula. So why does Rashi change? Here he says slula, and there he says mesila. Obviously, it's the same shadish word, so the word mistoilel doesn't change the meaning. But why is Rashi using the example word differently here from there? Gimel, v'avaz zog tar Rashi migizras derech loy selula, unit bekitza migizras slula. If Rashi wants to translate the word mistoilel, that it means stepping on something, trotting, then he should have said migizras selula, which means a trodden path. Why does Rashi add the words derech loy? Al derech v'yazakten paras v'era migizras mesila. Besides, in Va'era, besides using the word mesila, he also only uses the word mesila. He doesn't say derech loy mesila, which obviously wouldn't make sense, but I'm saying he uses one word that tells us what mistoilel means. So why couldn't Rashi over here also use just one word? So question Beis is why say mesila in one place and slula in another place? Question Gimel is why add the words derech loy to the word slula? Is there bir in dem al derech haremes appears Rashi? Here is the answer. The Rebbe's bir, the Rebbe's explanation. And this doesn't follow necessarily pshutei shel mikra, but it goes in the way of remes. Der Chelek zwischen unser Parsha and Parshas Va'era is the difference between our Parsha and Parshas Va'era. Parshas Miketz Kanal Red Kanal wegen dem Ketz von Zman HaChana zu Golos Mitzrayim. Parshas Miketz is the end of the preparatory period to Golos Mitzrayim. Dagegen in Parshas Va'era redt sich wegen die erste Makes, was der Rebster gebracht auf die Mitzrayim. In Parashas Va'era, we're already at a stage where the Eibishter began to bring the Makis, the plagues, onto the Egyptians. Haschalas Hagula, it's already the beginning of the redemption. Especially according to the opinion that Rosh Hashanah, the slavery already stopped. Now, if Makas Bechoros was in Nisan, then Makas Borod, which is where it says Oitcha Mistoilel, is in Chodesh Tevis, 4 months before, or Kislev, if maybe either Kislev or Tevis. So Rosh Hashanah already the slavery stopped. So you're talking about a time where the Gula began. So Miketz is right before the Gullus begins. Va'era is the beginning of the Gula. Und der Mites Move was in Parshas Va'era by the Mischalas HaGula. V'zot Rashi as Mistoilel is Megizas Mesila. In Parshas Va'era, we're already at the beginning of the Geula, Rashi uses the term Mesila. Hagamas Pari is Mistilel Ba'ami Levilti Shalcham, even though Pari is still stepping on them, trying to not let them go out of Mitzrayim. That's because Pari didn't get the message that the Geula began. Aber in Emerson is this Megizras Mesila. In truth, this comes from the root of the path. She's showing an oish getraten weg to the Geula. It's already a trodden, beaten, a paved path to the Geula. Because the very fact that Pari is still trying to not send them is given to show the power of Hashem, to spread the name of Hashem in the world, to multiply the miracles of Hashem in Mitzrayim. In unser Parsha, wo der Teichen is as Chalas Agolus, is der Mistelel Ba'ami in a Nefen von Derech Loy Selula. Here, the fact that Pari is the concept of stepping on the people is in the manner of a non-trodden path, as that given an emes galus that still seems to be a true galus. So this explains the answer to why Rashi in one place uses the lashon mesila, and another place he uses the lashon slula and derech loy slula, because derech haremez, Rashi is explaining that in Ve'era the path had not yet been paved to be able to recognize that this is that we're heading to the Geula. But in Parshas Va'era, we're already recognizing the Geula, we're already seeing the Mesila, that even though Paro is still fighting, but we already see the Mesila, we already see the path to the Geula, and therefore Rashi hints to these two situations by using two different words that come from the same Shadish, but obviously have two different connotations. We still didn't answer the first question, why Rashi says mistoidel to the end of Rashi. We will get to that in Sif Yud. But in the meantime, the Rebbe is now going to take these two ideas, derech loy selula and mesila, and fuse them together as one thing, based on what we explained earlier in the Sikha. Afal pikein, vibal das beide perushim in Rashi, megizas derech loy selula und megizas mesilas and nefen selben word. Since both of these explanations are in the same word, is a raya ze haben atechem as bin ze zusammen. They must be something that connects the two of them. And what is it? Here's the connection. Oich der derech loy selula is a derech mesila was fir to the gula. Even the non-beaten path, the unpaved path, is also part of the path leading to the Geula. So in the beginning, it's not yet a trodden way. Because it still seems to be a true Galus. Is the derech von lei slula. Even the negativity is truly a beaten path. Galus gufa is an inyan from Mesila l'sharami. Galus itself is the road. A Mesila to the Geula, it is a path to the Geula. Because the whole purpose and goal of Mitzrayim is Yitzias Mitzrayim un Matan Torah, is to go out of Mitzrayim and to receive the Torah. And therefore, the derech loy slula is connected with Mesila. It only seems to be a loy slula. It only seems to be that there's no path, or the path is not paved. But in truth, the loy is slula. The negativity is beaten, is paved. Und the Rebbe bringt Rashi the doing from Stedel Bami versteht bei die Makis mit welcher hat sich angegeben in the Geula Kanal in unser Parsha, and this is why Rashi brings this word mistoilo, which really is a word that comes from Va'era, where the Geula already began. Rashi brings it in this Parsha. Where we're still talking about the preparation to and the beginning of the Galus. Because already in the very beginning of Galus, before they even go down into Galus, we already know and already have the ultimate goal, which is the Geula. Sif Yud, al pi anal, is eich muvim v'vaz, Rashi stellt die Dugma from Mistoilel zum Sof sein Pirush. This explains why Rashi tells us the word Mistoilel at the end of the Pirush. Medem is a meramid, because he's hinting to us something very powerful. As the Abschluss, the culmination, the conclusion, und Tachlis, and the purpose from the Miurois was während erzählt in the Parshas von Yeshu Miketz, from all of these events that are being told to us in these Parshas, welche haben der future Galus Mitzrayim, which led to the Galus in Mitzrayim, is schön verbunden mit der Geulus, is schön da in Galus B'pnimius. He's telling us the end is Mistoilo. Everything that we're happening now, you should know about the end. It's a Mesila. It's a path to the Geula. So that's why Rashi puts it at the end, to tell us that is the end of the story. Right now we're hearing the beginning of the story, and we could be concerned what's going to happen in the end. Says Rashi, don't worry, the story has a happy ending. That even in the loy there's a mesila, there's a slula. Even in the mistoilel, it's only for the purpose of bringing godliness to the world. The goal of it all and the end of it all, and the end of the story is the geula. Geula from Mitzrayim. When it gets from Galus and the same thing applies to this final Galus. When a Yid realizes and internalizes that the whole concept of Galus is only an external thing, or from Galus, but on a deeper level, a Yid stands higher than Galus. And we already have the future in our hands. This brings out this true essence from the concealed level to the revealed level. This brings the Geula, the ultimate Geula, may it be through with Mashiach Tzidkenu, may it be Bekar of Mamish. So we started out with Rashi and the Taich of Chalila, and it led us to understand that a Yid is not shaykh to chulin, and that galus is really ultimately geula, and all we have to do is reveal the fact that the essence of a yid is the neshama, and that the essence of galus is geula, and when we do that, we actually bring the geula in a revealed way. May it be B'kar of Mamish.